Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our webinar today about building meaningful supplier engagement. My name's Ashley Piatek. I'm our sales and business development lead here at 3R Sustainability, and I will be moderating the session today. So before we jump in, I'd like to give everybody a bit of a background about 3R and our webinar series, and then we'll hop into introductions and get into the meat of today's conversation. So 3R Sustainability is a full-service sustainability firm. We are based out of Pittsburgh, but very much have a remote workforce all over the US and Europe as well. We were founded in 2015, and we support our pretty diverse client base with a number of different services. We really focus on meeting our clients where they are in their sustainability journey and then growing with them as they build out and grow their initiatives and program. Some service areas that you can see here listed that we support our clients with are, we really take a management system approach to our work. We are often supporting clients with climate initiatives like their GHG inventories. We're doing a lot of climate risk assessments right now, preparing folks for the California regulations in the beginning of the year. We have an entire built environment team that supports with building performance like waste, water, energy audits, as well as certifications like LEED. We have a whole assurance division that supports with GHG inventory assurance, as well as report assurance and others. We have a product and packaging team. And then relevant to today's conversation, we have a team that supports supply chain sustainability as well. And we very much practice what we preach. So we are woman-owned and run business. We're a B Corp. We are an EcoVadis strategic training partner. So we do a ton of work with EcoVadis, which we're going to be excited. We have Lena here to talk more about this conversation with us from EcoVadis today. We're a CDP accredited partner. The list goes on. And then a little bit about our webinar series. So this is a webinar of a series of webinars that we do throughout the year. Pretty much every month we are hosting webinars, and each webinar is on a different topic that is relevant to the industry, to the market, to our clients, and we bring in our experts from our team as well as guests to speak on these topics and kind of share expertise, experience, best practices. Our next ones are in October, so we're skipping September, but please tune in October. We'll be talking about EcoVadis and practical improvements for meeting customer requirements on the 2nd, and then on the 30th about reporting, which is very timely as we go into these final months of the year, and everybody, or a lot of folks, are thinking about their reporting efforts for 2026. Final note before I hand it over is a bit of housekeeping. So we will have a Q&A for about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar. Please utilize the Q&A function, ask questions throughout the webinar. I'll make sure to track those and we'll come back to them at the end when we open up the floor. All right, so I'd love to have our panelists introduce themselves, and to get us started, I'll hand it off to Lena Zotos from EcoVadis. Lena?
Thanks, Ashley. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. I am a senior account executive with EcoVadis, excited to join the panel today to discuss how EcoVadis kind of fits into the bigger framework. So looking forward to the discussion and providing additional context from our perspective. I think Josh, yeah.
Yeah, I can jump in here next. Likewise, great to be here today on this panel. I'm a senior manager at 3R, support clients in a variety of areas, including EcoVadis, as Lena's here, but also in the sustainable procurement space, building out sustainable procurement policies and really supporting throughout the the whole program. So really excited to share some thoughts. But otherwise, I'll hand it to Fraser for her introduction.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. My name is Fraser Opal, and I support both our supply chain and our product and packaging sustainability services at 3R. And I come from a long career in supply chain strategy and sustainability in consumer goods companies. I'm calling from Portland, Oregon, so hello to anyone on the West Coast. And I'm personally super passionate about the supply chain space because it is really where you can make an impact with your business for not only your sustainability goals, but also just so crucial for building resilience in your supply chain too. So excited to dive into this topic on supplier engagement with you all today. And I get to kick us off. So we'll jump to the next slide. Thanks, Ashley. So today we'll cover one, just why supplier engagement matters and why it's important to your business. Two, we'll flow into then a 7-step engagement framework that we like to use at 3R when we think about supplier engagement. And then 3, we'll go into EcoVadis and some tools on that platform that can help you in this space. And then we'll dive into Q&A. Great, let's get started. So why supplier engagement matters? I always think about engaged partners being trusted partners that are with you and will work with you to really help you avoid and prevent disruption, in your supply chain. They are so key to help you mitigate risks early. And when you're partnering together, you're then working to really strengthen that operational continuity that you need and building in that resilience for the long term. Number 2 is trust. You're building trust, you're building long-term value together. So that transparent and really consistent engagement with your supplier base helps to build loyalty with them. It also helps to build credibility for your brand. You'll be a brand suppliers want to work with. And then together, there's likely opportunities for you to co-innovate and together grow and evolve as companies. And then finally, driving sustainability progress. It's amazing to realize most of a company's scope 3 emissions, 70 to 90%, come from your supply chain. And you can't achieve big, ambitious greenhouse gas goals without effective engagement with your supply base. So it's so crucial to partner together to achieve those goals, and thus you're both building credibility for both of your brands and together growing and achieving those goals as a team. Okay, next slide. So this is the 7-step framework that we like to think about at 3R, and it includes what you see here. Number 1 is developing internal policies for your company. You have the baseline frameworks and playbooks that you use to then integrate effective supplier engagement into your operations. Number 2 is setting goals, thinking about ambition beyond just compliance and how you achieve those goals together with your suppliers. 3 is establishing program governance. What do you need to set up internally to make those policies and goals come to life? 4 is engagement and how you prioritize engagement with your suppliers. 5 is collaboration. 6 is building capacity with your suppliers so that they have the tools and the knowledge that they need to achieve those goals. And then 7 is tracking their progress. So we'll dive into it, and I'll cover a few of these, pass it to Josh, and then we'll hear from Lena about EcoVadis. Policies. So number 1, again, those internal playbooks and frameworks that you use and build in your company. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some examples that we wanted to share for you to think about as you kick off work in this space. Number 1 is supplier due diligence playbook or policy or framework. And what this is really an outline and your overall approach for how you're getting after supplier engagement internally. How are you actually vetting your suppliers? How are you monitoring risk with them? How are you responding to that risk? Really a guidebook for you to follow so that you're holistically and consistently approaching suppliers. So this, of course, then builds really proactive risk management in your supply chain. It helps to then build resilience, and it also checks the box for some regulatory compliance requirements. For example, the German Due Diligence Act requires companies to formally prevent and manage human rights and environmental risks in their supply chain. So a supplier due diligence playbook can really help to guide you and ensure you're doing that consistently year over year. Number 2 is the supplier code of conduct. Likely a familiar policy to many of you. And this is a supplier-facing document that really helps to define expectations you have of those companies. It can cover several spaces: environment, labor, health and safety, and again, really helps to ensure and enable consistent progress because everyone's following the same playbook. And it's a clear standard that you have from your company to your suppliers. So as a result, accountability is easier. And then it also checks the box for regulatory compliance. For example, the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive requires companies to have a supplier code of conduct in place. The third one that I'll highlight is not its own standalone document, but a suggestion for integrating clauses into your supplier contracts, which articulate the goals and standards of your suppliers. So because you have language in there about what you expect on human rights or in the environment, you're really making them the policies that you have binding for your suppliers. And that then enables you to enforce those policies. And because it's in a formal signed document between both companies, it really then signals the importance of ESG as a really core part of your business contract. And then the final policy that I'll suggest is a sustainable procurement policy. Procurement is such a crucial partner in your business for supplier engagement. They're really the ones that are making decisions about who you're engaging with. And so a playbook or a policy for your procurement team can make sure that those teammates are considering sustainability as well as their typical price and quality considerations. They also, because they're the ones deciding who you're partnering with, those decisions will help to make or break the targets that you've set. And then again, with those practices in place, when you're buying from responsible suppliers, you're improving that transparency and trust for your brand. Okay, we'll flow to the next one. Thanks, Ashley. Setting goals. So goals are also a really key component of your supplier engagement policies and deserve their own page. They're really signaling to your suppliers what's important for your brand beyond just compliance standards and really what you want to achieve and be ambitious about together. So you can set goals either before you're engaging with your suppliers or in partnership with them, depending on where you are. But here are a couple of points to consider when you're setting goals internally. One is focusing on where improvement matters most for your company. What will really help to accelerate your business? What are the biggest impacts in your supply chain you need to manage? Where are those impacts? And what are your peers doing? If everyone has an SBTI target, you likely should too. But really important to not just think about your brand, but also start to consider what's important and what are priorities for your suppliers too. So think about what will also support their business. Where can you both save money? And I love the example of a waste reduction goal, for example. They're likely going to save dollars on their end. You're both achieving a goal, and maybe it even impacts pricing for you. Third is thinking about just that classic goal setting framework, SMART goals. We love using this framework at 3R: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals. Super important that they're clear, they have that set time frame so that, again, you know what you're getting after together. And then finally, important to just think about, as you set those goals, how do you then embed them into your relationship? Where do they show up in your contracts? How do you monitor performance in scorecards, et cetera? Really needs to be a consistent focus and topic of conversation with you and your suppliers. Okay, Next slide, Ashley. Thanks. So number 3 is establishing program governance. So once you have those policies designed and you have goals established for your company, you then need to think about what frameworks and tools you have in place to bring those policies and goals to life. And we like to think about the framework of people, processes, and tools as you embed these policies into your business. So people, what's important there? Number 1, I like to really highlight the importance of leadership buy-in. Senior executive support and championing of supplier engagement is so important for you to then be able to effectively integrate this process into your business. It's also really important to have clear roles and responsibilities across your team. Who's in charge of the supplier relationship management process? Who in procurement is really leading and championing your sustainability priorities? Who are you working with in compliance? Make sure that those teams know what they're supposed to do and how to work together. And then third is training. Internal training, especially for your procurement team, is really important so that, again, they know how to approach suppliers with the sustainability standards and goals that you've created. Process. This one, of course, is also really, really huge. You need to think about how you actually integrate your policies into your business processes and your cadence so that, and it's just a part of your day-to-day operations. So think about at what point of your business cadence and cycle are you doing that supplier due diligence process? Or when are you actually reviewing supplier sustainability scorecards? Have really clear points in time throughout the year where you focus in and execute those policies. Feedback loops are also really important. You need to make sure you have mechanisms in place to monitor your suppliers, resolve issues, and really hear from them what's working well, what are the roadblocks they're facing, and then how can you support them. Performance management, also very related to that, ensuring you have forums and processes set up so that you can check in to see if your policies are being adhered to. Finally, tools. Tools really complement the processes you have in place. We love a good dashboard that helps you visualize supplier risk, scorecards that help you see the performance of your suppliers, great tools. Collaboration forums are also so powerful to open up those feedback loops. And then think about a centralized management system. How do you manage all of this documentation and communication? And can you bring it together into one kind of central place so that you're organized and you can really reduce administrative overhead? Okay. Whew, almost done. One more slide for me. Number 4, kind of in the middle of that 7-step framework, prioritizing engagement. So we know we have thousands of suppliers likely in your supply chain, and you can't engage with every single one of them. So it's really important you have a framework and approach to prioritize those suppliers so that you know who and how you're engaging with each. So what we like to suggest is this kind of flow that you see here. Number 1 is really assessing your baseline. What do you know about your supply chain today? Gather that supplier data and see where you have gaps that you then need to investigate so that you have a complete picture of your suppliers. Second is then you look at that supply base and you really think about which suppliers are high risk or high impact. And high risk could mean they're in high risk geographies for political reasons, for example, or they're sourcing sensitive materials like conflict minerals. They could be huge carbon emitters, so they could have a big sustainability risk. Maybe they have poor past audit results, so you want to flag them. Or maybe there's a really important long-term crucial partner that has been with your business since the beginning that you want to make sure are always incorporated into your strategic conversations. You then want to kind of balance that information with financial or operational performance to then allow you to have kind of a segmentation framework. So you can see that on the bottom of this slide, a suggestion to think about which suppliers were high risk or high impact and have high spend. Those could then be your deep engagement suppliers. Which suppliers have medium risk, medium spend, moderate engagement, lower risk, lower spend, light engagement. So that then allows you to prioritize how you're working with your supply base. And you can really then focus your resources on those deep and moderate engagement suppliers and then partner with them to perform sustainability assessments, track progress, etc. All right. So I now get to pass the baton to Josh to talk about collaboration with suppliers. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Fraser. So I'll be going through the next 3 steps in the framework here, and starting with potentially the most important. And if there's anything I'd like you to remember from what I'm about to present, it's kind of silly and obvious, but you can't go at supplier engagement alone. It is a partnership, and you need to have that partnership mindset to really drive that impact throughout your supply chain. Fraser mentioned earlier about building mutual growth and trust, and I think that is really so essential, because really that is the ultimate goal of supplier engagement, is to have both the requesting company and the supplier grow, develop, improve their sustainability programs, improve their business overall. And I'll walk through these steps we have outlined here on the left side to exemplify how you can start to do some of that. So starting at the top with communicate vision and goals. I think it's really important to communicate the why. Very clear, concise, crisp language on why this is important to you and why it's important for the supply chain at large. And then making it relevant and impactful. Companies want to know why this is important. So again, it goes back to the why, is making it so that they understand the actions and how it directly impacts your goals, but also can help their business as well. And for that communication, it's really helpful to use multiple channels. So have consistent touch points, have meetings, and have it in your contracts, as Fraser alluded to earlier. Have it be part of a sustainable procurement policy, all of that. So moving down to the right, so co-creating action plans. Here, I think this is really important to identify hotspots and potentially blind spots, points of concerns that you as the requesting company may not be aware of. So being able to have those communications and see what the pain points are can help identify what the appropriate actions should be. If you're just going at it alone, you may totally miss the mark on what the problems are, and addressing them appropriately. So moving into build-in checkpoints, I touched on this a little bit already, but having that consistency is a great way to build accountability for all the parties involved. It's also a really good opportunity to limit surprises. You'll hear me say that a couple times in this presentation, where you want to be upfront with progress, and if it's not being met, then it's clear on what the expectations are. So I think when you're going into these meetings, you don't want there to be surprises from either side. So those built-in checkpoints are really important for the communication. This fourth one here, link progress to incentives. So here, there's quite a few options, and you can really be creative in this space, but a couple ideas are preferential contracts or opportunity for future business, and supplier recognition, I think, is a really good opportunity to kind of a quick win in a lot of ways to build support for the programming that you're putting in place. And then the last one is build capacity, which I'm going to talk about more on the next slide. So I'd like to direct your attention to the bottom banner there and highlight a few areas that you can build capacity. I've seen there's a much better uptake in these programs when, again, it's a partnership and you're sharing resources. So if you, as the requesting company, as the brand, are providing webinars and training sessions and really being collaborative in that approach, it's going to make this stickier, if you want to use that word. And then also Fraser mentioned about the prioritization of the engagement. And here, I think it's really important to think about that segmentation of what suppliers are missing what pieces of information, what pieces of resources. So say you have a group of suppliers that has low carbon maturity, low carbon management maturity. You could put in place a specific training program for that segmented group. It can be more introductory, or if you have more mature companies, it can be really more advanced. So just targeting what those trainings and corrective actions are, I think is really essential for making this be as productive as possible. Touch on a couple others. So learning paths and toolkits, again, being that resource. You want to be a resourceful partner. You don't want to necessarily be demanding of everything. You want it to be collaborative. Again, using the word collaborative a lot, but it is the kind of fundamental portion of this work. And lastly, supplier councils. Really good opportunity for suppliers to come together with you to have those conversations and maybe do some group brainstorming on ways to address some of the big problems and solve those solutions in a more holistic way rather than a one-off with just an individual supplier. Also, I'll plug this as a good opportunity to spotlight those high achievers. So if you've seen a lot of progress from a specific supplier over the past 6 months or whatever it may be, really good chance to shout them out, show that recognition. Okay, go to the next slide, please. So the last step in the framework here is tracking progress. So, you can't improve what you don't measure, and keeping suppliers up to date with progress. Again, limit those surprises. And I think there's some good tools here to think about where you could do quarterly business reviews or scorecards, as Fraser mentioned earlier. There's shared platforms, shared dashboards like EcoVadis and others that Lena will talk on here soon. And then you also want to be sure that you're verifying performance. So as you do maybe a sustainability assessment or something like that, you want to make sure that it's accurate and meaningful. And in some cases, that's where on-site audits could come into place, or maybe third-party certifications. Okay, and next slide, please. Wanted to include this as a bit of a summary as it hits several steps in that framework that we've been discussing. But if you think of this a bit like an onion, where the outside of the onion is the light engagement. Here, you're really trying to determine inherent risk for your supply chain at large. And if there's any suppliers that maybe maybe supplying a risky or a potential conflict mineral, something like that, its identification is important. And then also sharing what your expectations are. So that's where the supplier code of conduct comes in, and the high-level sustainability risk screening. So you're looking at that for a large percentage, maybe 100% of your supply base. And as you identify that inherent risk, now you want to begin to validate it to see if the supplier has the business practices, the management systems in place to kind of mitigate that risk. So here you're looking at a smaller percentage, around 50%, about half of them. And this is where you get into a bit more of that one-on-one engagement, where you have the training plans, you have the continual improvement, corrective actions. You could do supplier sustainability assessments, as well as I mentioned, the training, capacity building. This is really where you're going to dive deeper into that. And then lastly, for the smallest percentage of your supply group, 10 to 20%, here you're doing much deeper engagement and potentially doing things like on-site audits, implementing a worker voice survey to identify if there's any risk amongst the workers of those specific suppliers. But again, this is for the smallest percentage. Okay, so in final conclusion, and then I'll hand it over to Lena, just some key takeaways for you. Integrating your policies and goals into your business processes and supplier relationships, segmenting your suppliers to prioritize engagement, very critical, and then collaboration. Collaboration is my word for the day. but collaborating will create that mutual trust and growth. And then the perfect segue is leveraging tools such as EcoVadis, which I think fits very nicely throughout the whole framework that we've talked about, really helps enable effective engagement and tracking. So without further ado, Lena, take it away.
Thanks, Josh. For those that might not be familiar with EcoVadis, I'll share a little bit of an about us first. So we as a provider we're a sustainable procurement provider. How do we do this? EcoVadis supports sustainable procurement through a number of different use cases, candidly, depending on your role and your scope. It'll apply to you in some ways versus a different team in other ways. But broadly speaking, we help teams in systematically assessing and validating ESG risk across your supply chain. We then help with engaging with your suppliers strategically. Oftentimes, this is based on what the risk data that's returned informs us about, right? An example could be focusing on high risk to medium risk suppliers as a top priority, or focusing on suppliers that have a material impact to your business when you're thinking about engagement and collaboration. Where necessary, we also support with building capacity through suggested corrective actions, as well as academy guidance to help drive improvements. This all operates kind of in a circular way, right? And it supports your reporting at the end of the day too. So all of this really to help make better business decisions and report where necessary, whether that's internally to a board or to investors, or if it's to clients or externally for regulatory purposes. And we really aim to do this in a way that is intended to reduce strain on your team and your resources, and in such a way that it helps to reduce supplier survey fatigue, and holding their hand a little bit too along the way. So our tools are really designed to meet you where you're at on your sustainability journey. As Josh mentioned, a lot of what we do is, I think, weaves well into the 7-step framework. And the system itself is very flexible and intended to be scalable with a global network, and using data that you can trust. So all of this also helping you meet your suppliers where they're at the end of the day. So relating this back to the 7-step framework presented here today, and to quote Josh first, you can't improve or report on what you don't measure. So we're finding that identifying supplier sustainability risk, having that be transparent and upfront, is really playing a critical role for teams, from the RFX process to reporting to clients at their request, sharing what your practices look like, what your suppliers' practices look like, as well as supporting public sustainability reporting and reporting for regulations. So sustainability is really more and more weaving into that supplier engagement process, and integrates well as you're thinking about your sustainable procurement program and how you look at engagement. So a takeaway I hope folks come away from today's session with is, often you don't know what you don't know, and it can be really tough to know where to start. But frameworks such as this can really help organize the scaffolding for an effective program. And with the right tools, we hope that you have the strong building blocks for a program that can scale productively, but also with resilience over time. So while I'm not going into the details of each of our solutions today, I'm happy to cover that, at your convenience. So please feel free to get in touch if this resonates with you. I'll pass it back to Ashley, I think.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Wealth of information and knowledge here on this panel. So thank you to all for breaking that down for us. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. We have a couple questions that came through so far, so we'll start with those, but please, over the next couple minutes, feel free to add any more. Okay, here. So starting off with, who should own the supplier engagement process? Procurement, supply chain, or business units? How about Josh? Would you like to take that?
Yeah, I can. I'll start with this. I'll say all of the above in a lot of ways. Procurement is generally going to be driving a lot of those conversations, and owns the overall strategy, governance, I would say, and really acts as that bridge between your internal stakeholders and the suppliers. So a lot's going to fall on the procurement team. There's also a component of the sustainability team, if that's in place, to meet some of those goals that Fraser mentioned. Like if you have a scope 3 target that you want to meet, really good to incorporate the sustainability team. Then business units, certainly bringing those groups, bringing all the stakeholders together, allows you to have some innovative solutions and understand the needs better. The kind of lower you get to the business units, they're going to understand the individual suppliers a little bit better, so you can identify problems and come up with those solutions. And then, of course, the executive team. Definitely having that leadership buy-in is key to drive the vision forward.
Excellent. Next one is, how should we handle disengaged or underperforming suppliers? Fraser?
Sure, I can take that one. It's a good question, for sure. And I think I would start with thinking about that segmentation process and framework first and what you've built in your company to make sure that those suppliers fall kind of into that center of the onion that Josh presented. You want those suppliers to be either moderate or deeper engagement suppliers that you want to prioritize your own resources to engage with. And so if that checks, I would also say you also need to start talking with them. And really, I think asking them and trying to understand root cause analysis. Are they unwilling to engage, or are they actually unable to? Are there any blockers that are not allowing them to meet the standards you're setting? For example, do they not have the capacity that they need? And again, that requires those open feedback loops so that you're hearing from them what their roadblocks are, and then you're meeting them where they are to support them in that journey. And then I would also say that if they're not meeting the standards that you've set, co-create those next steps together. Don't just tell them what to do, but sit down and say, okay, what's really possible, and kind of map out next steps. And again, tell them you're a partner with them, willing to support where they need it. And so they feel like they're a partner versus a supplier and a removed brand on your end. So partnership, collaboration, again, I'll use that. So key to help engage your supply base.
Thank
If
you,
I could add
Fraser.
one thing to
Yep,
that.
please.
I think the messaging is really important here about the why. I know I mentioned that earlier, but really explaining why this is important, why this is mutually beneficial. Mutual beneficial is really the key messaging that I would focus on.
Totally agree.
Thank you. Next question we have is, how can we be sure that our suppliers are not greenwashing? It's a good question. Lena, I'd love to hear your take from EcoVadis' perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, especially in today's world, right, where it's really top of mind, I think, for a lot of folks, even just from an optics perspective. So, at EcoVadis, when we think about how we are looking at that, we look at a combination of both inherent risk based on country, based on industry associated with a supplier, as well as looking at policies, actions, and results. So also taking that focus on tangible evidence. So, when we think about suppliers engaging via EcoVadis, the assessments also go through 3 levels of analysts for review. And this is all intended to ensure that there is substantial review before providing a score for a supplier. So I think your engagement with your suppliers is going to possibly vary depending on what the risk associated with them looks like. But there are a lot of documentations that can be trusted, for instance, ISO certifications, things that are dated, that are shown to be current as evidence. And so by utilizing kind of that twofold method, the inherent risk as well as the evidenced risk, that's the approach that we take.
Wonderful. Okay. And then one more, Lena. This is also focused towards you and EcoVadis. How does EcoVadis look at sustainability practices of suppliers?
Yeah, I think there could be a really long answer to this that I could spend up on. But to kind of shorten it, we utilize both contactless AI data collection methods as well as direct engagement through our assessments. So for some context, our methodology is modeled off of OECD guidelines and aligned to leading international standards. This also means that when regulations shift, we really do our best to incorporate that into our data collection methods and the methodology over time. So maintaining what's required for compliance, what's required for due diligence, so that your teams don't necessarily need to do all of that research and upkeep. We also, when we're looking at sustainability themes, we are assessing risk across 4. So environment, labor and human rights, looking at ethics, as well as sustainable procurement. And then within each theme, there are different categories that go deeper that are dependent on the industry of a particular supplier as well as their geography. So for instance, under the environmental theme, we might look at things like energy and consumption, as well as GHGs, materials and chemical waste, where it's relevant, right? We're not going to look at the same criteria for a law firm as we might for a chemical manufacturing firm. So it's tailored in that way and meant to be specific in that way, but also standardized by industry and geography so that we're able to also aggregate that data and give you some really tangible and actionable insights, both on the supplier specific level as well as an aggregate. So yeah, as mentioned, the questions are going to vary by industry and geography as well. Lots more to go into on that to the extent that folks want to dive deeper separately.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. Okay, I know we are coming up against time here, so I think it's a good time to wrap it up. Thank you to everyone on our panel, Lena, for joining us today, and everybody for joining this webinar. If you're looking to join in on the next ones or see kind of what's upcoming for our webinar series, we have a website page that lists them on the 3R sustainability website. We have a LinkedIn where we are posting often. We have a newsletter as well. So a couple places where you can check out what's to come. But thank you to all. I hope everybody has a great day and that we see you again soon.